because there's a thing that Job says at the end of the chapter. Yeah, that's so good. That's great.
I don't want to hear the story of Job
I know.
necessarily. Yeah, we'll get to Job, I guess. Episode 83 of Vertical Pursuit. You know, where was Joe this morning when I walked in?
Oh, Joe snuck his way upstairs.
Okay, because normally he's laying by the fire.
He is always laying by the fire.
I looked at my dog this morning, and this is kind of a crazy way to start, but I looked at my dog this morning, and I was really jealous of my dog. Because he's laying there, and I know what his expectations are for the day. And he's laying there with no concerns, no worry. Somebody's going to fill his food bowl. It's not like the old days where he was outside having to forage and eat garbage and whatever And I looked at him, I thought, man, that looks so peaceful, and I would really like to be you today. And then when I come over here and we do podcasts, I always see Joe just laying by the fire, just having a blast.
That's his life.
Peaceful.
Oh, yeah. No,
peaceful and happy and content.
The dog's life is the best life.
It's fantastic.
I mean, we got owners like us, of course, not some sort of roaming homeless dog, but it's funny. The other day we went to your house when you guys were gathering with your small group.
Yeah, I want to talk about that.
And so I walk over there, and Henry's awesome. Henry's so fun. Henry always meets you at the door with a toy in his mouth. Yeah. He wants to play.
Or socks.
Or socks.
He has an addiction to socks. And I've tried to break that, but he doesn't tear them up. He just carries them around.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
He just wants to play.
Yeah.
He wants to play.
Yeah. No, I don't want to interrupt you, but a couple from our life group, their dryer had broken, and so they knew we were going to have life group at our house. So they brought some laundry to dry. So they get their laundry dry during our life group, and
that's awesome.
And they folded it and put it by the door, and I said, don't put it there. So I've turned in. A little later, Henry walks in, and he's got 4 or 5 pairs of socks. He had gone in their laundry basket, and I said, he's going to get your socks. And he doesn't hurt them. He doesn't even really slobber on them. He just carries them all over the house.
Better the socks than any other unmentionables.
Yeah, he doesn't.
He's dragging around.
No, he doesn't.
See, so he's a good, well-behaved dog. He knows what he's
never
doing.
chewed up a shoe. Even you could leave a flip-flop out. He doesn't want that. He has a really bad addiction to socks.
Yeah,
and
a lot of dogs do. It's a chew thing. So
yeah, well, yeah, and with him, it's not even a chew thing. He just carries them around. I don't know. I don't understand why. And
it was so funny though, because when I walked in the house and everybody was eating and sitting around your dinner table, and I think you got up at the head of the table, whatever. And Henry just jumps right up like he's just like, hey, I'm part of this.
Yeah, in the chair. Yeah, that was a bad habit that started by the kids. It was funny one day. It was like the time we when he was young. He's 7 now, 7.5. But when the kids thought it was really funny to put on it was probably a Disney. This was back in the day, and he started watching TV and barking at whatever is on the TV, especially animals. So now he watches TV more. I have to limit his screen time because at night, oftentimes I'll have the TV on. My wife goes to sleep, and I usually lay down on the floor, and I'm usually on my phone, or I'm texting, or I'm sitting there, and he'll be up on the bed, and I think he's asleep. But if there's a movie on or a show, and I usually pick things that I know that there'll be a less chance that a dog will show up or a cat, and if he sees an animal on the screen, he is at that TV, man, barking and going at it. I can't break that habit on him either. So he is a flawed creature, like we all are. He's dealing with issues.
Just like my brain always goes with animals to some of those animations of cartoons of like, what is it like life to be a dog? Where they're almost like humanistic, and got all that. And you come home one day and Henry's sitting there, he's watching a game, he's got a beer, and he's like, he looks over at you and says, you want to sit with me? Yeah.
A beer would not be his vice. His vice would be a sock. We're working on that. But anyway, we had somebody in our life group had knew the book called, did we talk about this in the last episode? I don't think we did actually. There's a book called The Primal Question or Primal Questions.
Yeah.
It's kind of, if you've messed around, Mike Foster wrote it, Mike. If you've played it all with the Enneagram study, and a lot of Christian life groups have done that. My wife and I went through that. It was interesting. It kind of puts you in a category in terms of what your bent is, kind of what your personality is. And this is like that, and very valuable. And so a guy named Ben Lundquist, who I got to know, came over, and I didn't know this when he said, hey, there's a guy named Ben, and he teaches on this, kind of a life coach, a pastor of pastors. And Ben has a podcast called Rise and Lead. And I didn't know this, but it's in the top 1% of all podcasts.
Yeah.
And I'm talking to him before we kind of got started. I'm like, whoa. So then I pull up his Instagram. He's got a lot of followers. Anyway, you and I have connected with Ben.
Yeah, Ben's great.
You came over and stopped by and met Ben, and he's fantastic. And we're going to have him on the podcast.
That's right.
Very, very soon.
Very soon.
In the next couple of episodes. And that will be a neat one to listen to because I think companies will have him come in and speak, where he's one of those speakers who can fine tune his delivery for a Christian crowd and for one that maybe is more just business and doesn't necessarily want that.
Yeah.
More of just life coaching, I think, more secular world type stuff. But if you follow him and if you go on Instagram, Benjamin Lundquist is his Instagram, you'll see it's very, very Christian.
Oh, he's solid man of faith. Solid man of faith. And that's what I love about guys like Ben. And man, what a great guy. I mean, just getting to know him that night and just all the follow-up that we've been having in the last week with him. Just, man, he's the type of guy that when you hang out with, you walk away going, man, my life feels more hopeful. My life feels like more focused. And it's a real gift how God uses him. And what's great is he has that versatility to speak to a faith crowd like your guys' group or a church, but he can walk in and take the same principles. They're still godly principles.
Correct.
And he can translate that into the marketplace or business. And man, God uses guys like that in a variety of different atmospheres and places. So that's going to be a great podcast when he's on here.
Yes, and it should be in the next couple, hopefully. And he said he's happy to do it. And in fact, he did something very nice. You always post on Vertical Pursuit, which has an Instagram page and your own page, and I usually collaborate with you. We'll do a small snippet of whatever the VP episode was and then post that. Well, he put that on his story, the Vertical Pursuit podcast, which is really cool that he did that because he got a lot more followers than we do. And it was really nice of him to do. And I texted him and said, man, that was really cool. And he said, no, I love this stuff. And I loved the podcast. I'm not even sure which one. I can't remember the one he put on there. It wasn't the most recent one, but I think it was 81.
81, yeah.
It was 81. But anyway, so last night night winds down. It's 11 o'clock and I open Instagram and I've had a interesting week. And as I've talked about on this podcast a lot, pretty open about my struggle. My struggle is always with worry and not anxiety necessarily, although maybe they're the same thing. Just worry. And so I'm going to read what he posted last night. He does these, I guess they're motivational short messages.
Yeah, daily inspiration.
Yeah. So this is his last night, and I texted him right after it, and he got back to me, and I just said, dude, this is what I needed to hear tonight. And then I went on a little more, but this is what he said. You say you trust God, but you're still holding on, still trying to figure it out, still replaying every scenario in your mind. Oh my gosh, is that me? Trust isn't lip service, it's surrender. If you put it in God's hands, leave it there. Stop picking it back up. Stop letting worry rob your peace. That's me too. God is not just aware of your situation, he's already ahead of it. Your job isn't to stress over what's out of your control, it's to be faithful with what's in your hands. Work with what you have. Show up where you are. Maximize the season you're in. Worry changes nothing. Faith changes everything. If it's beyond you, give it to him. Mm-hmm. And I texted him and I said, man, you just hit me between the eyes because as we all can self-identify, some better than others a little bit, being self-aware. That's me. That whole thing, I wrote to him and I said, guilty as charged. I said, that is a massive, that and the worry about, to me anyway, unmet expectations.
Yeah. Yep.
And the idea that you could get everything you want. And what if you got everything you wanted? Would you be happy then?
Mm-hmm.
You think your suffering is caused by things not going your way?
Yeah.
And that goes back to something we have talked about before. Yeah. You always think, if only I had this, if only this worked out this way. Because how long would that happiness then last?
Mm-hmm.
Few minutes, few days, maybe. But you then would, I know myself, I would want more.
Yeah.
I would, because you can never have enough. And that can be anything. And more money, more attention, more security. It doesn't matter what it is. So the real problem isn't that things aren't going your way. Your problem is your inability to be okay no matter what happens.
Yeah.
So, and I know I just have kind of taken us off in this direction now after reading that quote, but we're going to circle everything back. So then I went to, of course, when you hear that and you spend any time in the world, in the Word about contentment, you go to Philippians and Paul.
Yeah.
Where and everybody knows the Steph Curry verse on his shoe, which I can do all things through God who strengthens me. Yeah. Yes. But I like going back a little further in that because in Philippians 4:10, this is all related to what I just talked about. In the first part of this, Paul is thanking his supporters, really, people who have supported him. He says, "But I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at last you have received your concern for me." And depending on your the version or the translation, it can almost go into which I didn't really notice before until I dove into that deeper this morning, but it almost sounds like he's talking to his supporters, financial supporters or whatever. Yeah. Indeed, you were concerned before, but you lacked opportunity, which I love. And as a pastor, I'm sure that hits home with you a little bit.
Absolutely.
I know you were concerned, but you lacked opportunity. And then he says, and this is a great teaching, and I love Paul because he's so authentic and he has such a profound sense of self-awareness. He says, "Not that I speak from want, for I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I am. I know how to get along with humble means, and I also know how to live in prosperity. In any and every circumstance, I have learned the secret to being filled and going hungry, both of having abundance and suffering need." And then the very famous one, "I can do all things through him who strengthens me. Nevertheless, you have done well to share with me in my affliction." So I think that's where everybody goes after hearing something like that. But what I always know is when I suffer, the problem isn't with my surroundings or my circumstances. The problem's with me. Because inside of us is a voice that says, I have to have things the way I need them to be in order to feel okay.
Yeah.
I suffer over the past a lot because I think that I needed it to be a certain way, and maybe it was and maybe it wasn't. I suffer over the future because I hope things will go a certain way in that future. So then we know this. We know a lot of things. Doesn't mean we do them. The only way to stop that suffering is to surrender. And you've heard this term a lot lately in culture, that you're letting something else live in your mind rent-free. We hear that all the time.
Yep.
Sometimes it's mocking somebody else. I'm living in their, a player in the NBA can say I'm living in their minds rent-free. But it's false. It's not something else or someone else living in your mind. It's your unmet expectations that are living in your mind rent-free. It doesn't have anything to do with another person or another situation. It has to do with what you thought they should, or the ways you thought that situation should work out in your life. But it puts us behind an 8-ball.
Yeah, absolutely. We're always managing those expectations. And I think that's, you said, when you brought up that passage where Paul said, I've learned the secret of being content. And you mentioned the following verse, which is a verse that we all know. And you mentioned Steph Curry, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I love the context of that. I remember I talked to Steph Curry about that one time.
You did?
Mm-hmm. It was, we were doing, it was actually at his brother Seth's wedding. I was officiating his brother Seth's wedding. And so we were just kind of hanging out and the wedding party's there. We were waiting for the wedding to start. So we're just kind of hanging out. And, you see Steph all the time when he comes to chapels. And so I talked with Steph several times over the years. And so this time we're just kind of hanging out before the game or before the wedding. And I said, hey, Steph, I go, why did you pick that verse? Why did you pick that verse as kind of a motto life verse of I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me? And we had this great conversation and we talked about faith. We talked about faith is like a boomerang. And what's supposed to happen with faith is that you send out faith, which is, God, I'm actually going to believe in you regardless of my circumstances. I'm going to believe in your power. I'm going to believe in your hope, your wisdom, your purpose for my life. Regardless of the circumstances, God, I'm going to put faith in you.
Because ideally, it's not about our ambitions for ourselves. It's about God's ambitions for us. Correct?
Exactly. And that's where I think we miss that. And so what I want is I'll throw out a prayer request and I'll expect the boomerang to come back with my expectations.
Met.
That's what we do. Like, here's my request, and now what I want returned to me. Things go the way I want them to go.
It's a genie in a bottle.
It's a genie in a bottle.
Santa Claus.
That's exactly it. And we all do that. And then we get disappointed with God. We get frustrated. And so like real faith is actually when you throw the boomerang at God, you have to release the expectations. And this is where some people go, are you saying we shouldn't have the expectation God can heal, God can provide? That's not what we're saying. You can still believe that God's going to work miraculously, whether that means that God does things the way you want to or not. But what you're releasing is the way God wants to work. And that's what true faith is. It's, I can live with expectation that God's going to do something because my expectation is not in the specifics, it's in his nature. That may not make sense, but if I prescribe to God, this is how things should go, and my expectations are so scripted and prescripted that way, then what happens if God's like, actually what you're asking for me is not even good for you. You think it is, and it may seem good to you, and then God's like, I actually have something for you that's different, and how he wants to reveal himself in our life, that if we're so prescripted with it and God doesn't meet that expectation, now we're angry, disappointed, and then we run down and we spiral into, oh, it must be me, God hates me, God's punishing me, God doesn't hear prayers, God doesn't hear my requests, God doesn't see me, he's too busy, and we begin to unravel, and really what happens is it fractures our relationship with God. So expectations is a huge part of understanding what does it mean to go through trials and hardships and trusting God, being content. I can do all things through Christ. That's why Paul said I can be content. It's a secret. He called it a secret for a reason, meaning most people don't know this. And that's why I think he used that word secret in a really good way. I also know that word content. I used to grow up thinking content means complacent. Like, well, you know what? This is my lot in life. I just have to settle for this. I just have to go through this. This is, a life where I'm just got to eke it out and be miserable. And this is the cards I've been given, and God's not going to change the cards and all that. It's not actually what the word content means. The word content there comes from the word container. So contents, when you say, hey, what are the contents of something? What you're saying is that within a container, there are contents like liquid, using a water bottle, for instance. And so to be content doesn't mean to settle. It doesn't mean to go, I'll throw my hands up in the air and giving up. It doesn't mean you don't even contend. To contend means I still pray for, like Bern, my wife, her healing. To be content doesn't mean, well, that's it. That's just, she's never going to be healed. That's just our lot in life. I'm never going to ask God. I'm never going to have any expectations that he can heal. No, to be content means I'm actually going to drink in the midst of this hard time. I'm going to drink of the contents of what God has for me in this season. And so to be content is to be in agreement with what God is providing in that season, not in disagreement. And that's why, like, for instance, if you're going through something hard and God says, in this season of your life, this is how I'm going to provide for you. When Paul prayed, and he was like, oh, Lord, take this thorn from my flesh. He's agonizing with God. Take this away, take this away. 3 times, which is kind of the symbol of this exhaustive, he's asking. And God says, I'm not going to take that away. What I will do, though, is I will provide my power in the midst of your weakness. What Paul wanted was deliverance from. He wanted to be delivered from it. God, just take this away. God said, I'm not going to take it from you. I'm not going to deliver you from it, but I will deliver you through it. And I'm going to provide power in the midst of that. I don't think it's what Paul wanted, but he also surrendered that and said, okay, not my, the idea is it's not my will, but yours. And so I think what Paul said, I can do all things through Christ. What he was saying is I can do all things through him because I'm going to drink from the contents of God's character, God's provision, and I'm going to agree. This is the hard part. I'm going to agree with what God's doing in this season or allowing in this season. So my expectation is more around God's nature, not an outcome, that I could get so prescripted that I'm looking at God almost like an ultimatum. God, do this, and if you don't, I'm not going to have faith in you. We never say that, but actually, that's how we live our lives. Mm-hmm. Like, if you don't do it this way, then I'm going to do things my way. I'm going to be angry at you, disappointed with you, or whatever. So I think that verse with Paul is a powerful verse. It's that boomerang. I'm going to throw everything at God, everything that stresses me out, everything that worries me, all the things I'm concerned about. That's faith. And then I'm going to allow what comes back, an agreement of how God wants to provide and what he wants to do in that season. Whether I agree with it or not, that's the challenge. That's the whole point of faith is, okay, God, I'm going to still believe that you're good. I'm going to still believe that you love me. You're not rejecting me. I'm still going to believe that you can heal in your timing. I'm still going to believe that you're shaping, you're refining in the midst of the fire. I'm going to believe those things. I'm going to receive and get on your page in the midst of that. That's what Paul says. That's why we have strength.
So the boomerang flies out, and then our challenge or our inability to be okay with what is the real problem. So how then, and maybe you partially just answered this, how then do we position ourselves to be without an attachment to an outcome?
Yeah,
how do we stop trying to control life and just experience it? To play your hand as it is dealt and stop clinging to outcomes.
Yeah.
Because sometimes I feel like, and I don't know if this is the case or not, it all depends on the way we view God. I feel like I'm constantly being taught lessons, and a lot of them aren't very fun. But I feel like part of that for me, that is, I know all this. I talk about this a lot. I know all this. I can't get over it. And I don't feel like I make much progress in it. And I feel like, well, maybe he is my feeling of being stuck, which I think a lot of us can feel that way. Wheels spinning, replaying over and over and over again, unmet expectations. That's obviously a me problem or a you problem. Because we expected reality the moment we let the boomerang go, we expected that reality to be different than it actually is. So you are the problem every single time.
We are. We're the
right.
problem.
That's what I mean. I mean, you as in me, as in you and me. And we hold on to the belief that our expectations or the world should have unfolded better and more in the way that we thought it should. And the longer that you fight with that truth, the more you suffer. So if we know that, why in the heck can't we get unstuck and battle these unmet expectations with just experience?
When you're talking about that, I was trying to think through some examples where, we always look to Jesus, but there's all kinds of stories in the Bible of people who were stuck. I like how you said stuck. You
did a sermon on being in a desert.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of guys tell me afterwards, I'm in a desert.
Oh, absolutely.
They identified with that.
Yes. Just the other night, our Wednesday group that we're both part of, and we've got a great group of guys. I don't know if we got like 30 some guys that meet and break into small groups and stuff. And our circle had this great conversation because we're going through the Gospel of Luke, and where Jesus says, don't worry. like a command. He says, don't worry about tomorrow. And then he uses the metaphors of flowers and the birds of the air and saying, doesn't God provide for those things? Yeah. And if God provides for things in creation, how much more you that God loves will take care of you. Here's what happens though. You and I have talked about this before is I think that I can have on rerun in my head times of hardships. And I think that, I look back, for instance, when I lost my dad at 22, and all of a sudden that created a whole bunch of new worries that, who else am I going to lose and when? And so it was a new paranoia I started living with. And that anytime that there's fear always leads to control, always, because we're trying to mitigate that fear. We're trying to mitigate. And here's what I do. I don't know if you do this, but I have the greatest imagination with every outcome possible.
Oh, geez, yes.
I can think of 30 scenarios. It's going to go this way, 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 this way. And it's amazing how our imaginations, and I know the people always quote, you hear all the quotes about 99% of the stuff we worry about never actually happens. I get that. I know all the self-talk. I get it. But that's still a pattern of cycle that we get stuck in. And God, help me break those cycles where I'm not stuck in this mental tornado that just circles and it just cycles around. Break me out of that. And I'm thinking of a couple things. Like, remember when Jesus was in the boat with the disciples and the storm comes up and the waves, and we know the classic, he's sleeping in the boat. And that to me was such a beautiful contrast, the storm all around. And that was the purpose of that story, was here's Jesus resting peacefully, sleeping, napping. Disciples are freaking out. They're thinking this is it. Ship's going down. They wake Jesus up, and he kind of reprimands them and says, you have little faith. And you realize that probably one of the most repeated phrases in the entire Bible, fear not, fear not, fear not. Fear not. You're like, okay, if you were to distill the Bible down and go, what's some of the most repeated things and themes that you see? Two of the most repeated themes from the very beginning of the Bible to the end is fear not, trust God. Fear not, trust God. Fear not, trust God, which means God understands our propensity to do that. And what ends up happening is we can spiral in several different ways. We can spiral in this mental prison where we're locked in the cage of scenarios and it causes anxiety and fear and worry. That's a prison. That is an absolute prison. And it's self-imprisoning. Yeah. It's like the keys are sitting right there and I could walk out anytime, but I don't, because I've locked myself in it. I'm putting myself in this prison. Mm. And then the other thing too, what it does is it makes me question God's integrity, question God's character, and I begin to hold him hostage, make ultimatums with him. And you see this like in the Old Testament with Israel when God was delivering the people. This was crazy. God says, hey, you guys are held by the Egyptians. You're slaves. I don't want you here. I'm going to lead you to the promised land. And so God tells Moses, free them. And as soon as they get on the road and they start moving out, and the first time they run into trouble, the Red Sea, they start complaining. They're whining with God. Why did you lead us here? How dare you, God? And they begin to question God's integrity. And here's the worst part about that whole story, and it's for all of us today, is that trip should have been a lot shorter. And what you found was every time they ran up against an obstacle, it was always worry. It was always they didn't trust God. The whole theme of wandering in the wilderness is, can you trust God? And that journey from captivity in Egypt to the promised land should have taken days, ended up taking years. And the reason for that was because they stopped trusting God, whether it was food, whether it was water. God's like, I got you. Just trust me. And I think that's the human condition, is we want to take things in our own hands. And what ends up happening sometimes, using them as a story, they actually formed other idols because God was taking too long. Moses went to meet with God, and they're like, gosh, they're looking at the clock going, he's taking too long. God's not working on our timeline. We're going to make our own idol. We're going to make our own gods. We're going to figure this out on our own. And I think that's the temptation for all of us is when God doesn't meet my expectations, when God doesn't meet my timeline, we begin to, unfortunately, look to other things and we make idols. We put our hope in other things more than we put hope in God. Hope in our own solutions, hope in our own resources, whatever. So this is a constant theme you see from the whole Bible. And I think it speaks to that. That's probably one of the number one things we all wrestle with, trusting God, giving him the expectations for outcomes and all of that.
So then how does it relate to, because I wanted to get your take on this too, because we discussed this a little bit before we started recording, but so then how should this, because I always want to learn from my stupid ways. I've got a lot of them, as you probably know if you've listened to us at all. How should this then shape our decision making?
Yeah.
So how do we make those decisions that we come to? Because what I end up doing is, and this is, you mentioned this a minute ago, and I mentioned this with Ben's quote earlier, even after we make the decisions, then we play out the various outcomes over and over and over in our minds. And then we can be, after decisions, we can have regret, which I've got, lots of regret for dumb decisions I've made or uneducated decisions I've made or snap decisions or emotional decisions. How do you view that decision making ideally from a eternal view and not worldly with all of these things in mind, knowing full well, no matter what decision you make, again, ideally, you're going to make the decision and then you're going to release control.
Yep. No,
which is not easy.
No, that's huge. We just did a chapel with team chapel the other night with the Blazers, and it was around decision making, and just because I think a lot of us, these all tie together: trusting God in circumstances, worry, anxiety, decision making.
It's funny you say that in a Blazer chapel. Sorry to interrupt you, but I was sitting there thinking what we used to say in broadcasting games a lot. And my partner, Mike Rice, was a former coach, and so was my dad. So the biggest compliment you could make about a player was he's a great decision maker. So your point guard on the team, what made a point guard good and what limited turnovers and took advantage of opportunities was his decision-making ability. Quarterback, same thing.
Yeah.
So your quarterback, your Tom Brady versus another guy who's 3 times more physically talented, what separates them is decision making.
Wow. I didn't even think about it, but yeah, they say that in sports. Like that is an ability and a sign of maturity. You look at a veteran player and you go, man, they just make smarter decisions because they have that life experience, court experience,
and that quick twitch ability to predict.
Yeah. Yes.
The next few seconds.
Absolutely.
Race car driver or whatever on what that decision making ability on what's going to happen. I mean, you can go out down the line, the good golfers, the Tiger Woods, whoever, on their ability to decision make and to execute that decision.
Wow. In the New Testament, there's the idea of that goes with that is you would almost say they got good instincts.
Yeah.
And there is something about.
But isn't that the same thing?
It's the same thing. And that's why actually in it's so good. We can do a whole other podcast on this, but in the New Testament, the idea there is there's godly instincts and then what's called fleshly instincts. And godly instincts is you're responding to situations based on God's wisdom. Fleshly instincts is I'm reacting, making decisions out of reaction, and I end up using foolishness as my way. And so there's that contrast between godly wisdom and godly instincts, and then responding to situations, not reacting to situations, that also leads to tons of regret. You look back and you go, oh my gosh, well, yeah, am I a react person or am I a responding person? And I think that theme is there, but it has to do with the instincts. And there's also, scripture says there's demonic wisdom, which is not wisdom, but it's meant to say there's the influence and things that are causing you to make decisions where you're not being led by God's Spirit or God's Word. And then there's another metaphor is talking about your sobriety and am I making decisions from a sober place, spiritually sober, or am I under the influence of my flesh? Am I under the influence
That's a good
of?
way to put it.
Yeah, And I think how many of us couldn't even walk a sobriety test in our wisdom because the influence we're intoxicated with fear, we're intoxicated with anxiety, things of the enemy that wants us to not trust God and all those sort of things. So causes me to be a reactive person, not a response person with godly wisdom. It was funny because I shared, here's just a couple thoughts. I was going to
say, I cut you off. I want to hear what you talked about with the players.
I brought my notes. I'm just going to share a couple of things, but I love this quote from Phil McGraw. I opened a chapel with this quote. Phil McGraw, he says it this way: sometimes you make the right decision. Sometimes you make the decision right. And I love what that is. Sometimes you make the right decision. And because one of the hardships is this, we all know this, when they talk about someone who is in danger, there's 3 responses to danger: fight, flight, or freeze. I think we do the same thing with decisions. Danger and decisions, we have the same response. So if I have a decision to make, especially if there's pressure on that decision or there's anxiety and worry attached to that, I can do a fight response, which is I can overreact, control, make a decision, then look back going, oh my gosh, that was an overreaction to things. I made the wrong decision because it was driven by fear, driven by control, whatever. Or you can also do the flight, which is I'm trying to avoid all decisions, and you kind of go the opposite direction. You're running away from God, and you're running not into it with God, you're running away from it. And then I think one of them is you freeze. How many of us are paralyzed? And we don't make decisions. We're indecisive because of worry. Oh no, I don't want to. If I make this decision, what if this? And I make this, what if this? And so I'm not making any decisions.
Yeah.
But making no decisions is a decision. So you're still making a decision to not do something or whatever, and that's a decision of. So that's the complex thing. So this Phil McGraw thing, he says you can sometimes make the right decisions. Sometimes you have to make the decisions right, meaning that when we screw up, and we're going to do that, even after we pray about things, seek God, get godly counsel, and we've got, man, the whole time I thought I was making the right decision, and then somehow it doesn't go right. Instead of beating ourselves up about it, what can you do now to keep moving forward with God through those, whatever the decision didn't work out the way it was supposed to? So I invested in something, or so I got into a relationship, or so I did something at work. I mean, these are all things I faced this week. And so you go, gosh, I didn't make those right decisions this week. Okay, well, what can I do to make those decisions now right? Is there something I can do to course correct, is all I'm saying. And that leads to another set of decisions and another set of trusting God. But what I'm trying to do is speak hope, because if I'm worried about decisions that there's going to be negative outcomes, I'll never make a decision. And so what I was telling the guys in chapel is, listen, sometimes you're going to make great decisions. Sometimes you're not. And when the ones you don't make decisions, guess who's right there with you to keep walking forward in that? And God is always faithful. God is always going to be there. And sometimes the greatest ways we see him is when we screw up, we mess up, we make bad decisions. I overreacted. I did this. I did that. Okay, let's keep moving forward, though. God picks us up. He meets us where we're at. Doesn't mean there's not consequences. I'm not saying that. All I'm saying is that no matter what, God is there to lead us through it. And I mean, I just came back from San Quentin, and we've had guys on the podcast who made horrible decisions in life, end up in prison, and you would say made some bad decisions. And doesn't mean their life's over. God can work in all those things. And you see that all throughout the Bible. So one of the things I shared with some guys is 6 steps when you're seeking wisdom. And these are just practical things, because sometimes we just need practical stuff.
Based on decision making?
Yeah, based on decision making. And this helps you mitigate fear and worry. This helps you not be stuck and paralyzed by decision, helps you not react to things and overreact. So I'll give you 6 of them real quick. But this is what I said. And I've gleaned these from the years, so they're not all from me. But the first thing when making a decision is check your posture. Check your posture. What does that mean? It means this. I need to align my mind and heart right now with God, not with fear, not with worry, not with pride. How many decisions do we make out of pride or ego? And so I got to check myself. Before I make any decision, is the decision I'm making coming from the right posture? Am I in a humble space right now, seeking input, seeking counsel, seeking God? So check my posture. First thing you do. Number 2 is always pray. And prayer is, James tells us, if you lack wisdom, ask, and God will give it to you. And so what you're doing is you're saying God already knows what you're asking. It's not like you're informing him. But what you're doing is, this is the crazy thing about prayer. Prayer is not about informing God, like he doesn't know what's going on. It's allowing God to form me as I'm praying. So while I'm praying, God is forming me peace. He's forming in me like, okay, God, but how many of us, we talked about this before we started, how many of us pray, and this is Ben's point, I give something to God, the worry, and I take it right back.
Of course.
That's what we were just talking about.
I can last usually 10 to 12 seconds before I take it back. That's my average. I'll give it away and go, I'm just not going to, Lord, you're just going to have to take this, and I'm going to give it all to you. And then 10 seconds later, right back in that crazy cycle of worry and concern. And some of that, to my shame, is it's a lack of confidence and it's a lack of security, and it turns into, and this is maybe some of those people who can't make a decision, and for a player, as a term we use, is paralysis by analysis.
Exactly.
And so you're overthinking every possible scenario so you don't make a decision.
Yeah.
And in the NBA or any whatever business, any leadership position, that doesn't work.
No.
And people sniff that out.
Absolutely.
And I find, and at times I read something the other day, or I saw something, and it was about a husband and wife thing. And my wife said, what time do you want to leave? Where do you want to go to dinner? And then and I said, whatever. And she said, no, what time? And then I read something that just said, just make a decision. She just wants a decision, because I really didn't care, but I think I need to make that out of a confidence, and maybe even to a little bit of a point in a business setting, leadership and security. Because I find that and this was not a case of overanalysis. It was just kind of like, make a decision and do it. But I do tend to then sit in my mind and overanalyze and overthink every possible outcome and scenario, and that paralyzes you.
Oh, absolutely.
Your wheels spin.
The wheels spin. And then sometimes we do become victims of self-fulfilling prophecy in that.
I hear that, and that scares me.
I know.
That really scares me. I have a friend who calls me on that all the time and says, dude, if the more you play out all these stupid scenarios, which is what we talked about in Ben's quote, he talked about playing out and getting stuck in all these scenarios, you're going to create those. And I'm like, wait, what? I don't like that thought, because I know the way I think. And I'm like, I don't want to think that I could create those scenarios. But if I do, if they're good things.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
I won the lottery. Exactly. I know I'm going to win the lottery. And so I do. But no, I'm very guilty of analyzing to the point of creating things to be nervous about that don't exist.
And we all do that. I struggle with that. I pray about something within an hour. Why am I stressing on that again? Why am I worried about that? Why am I dreaming about all the, I'm anticipating, and I'm coming up with, how do I prepare for this and this and that? And I think we all do that. But that prayer to me it's not informing God, but allowing God to form me back. It's almost like an aligning time. Prayer this is where I think we miss it. It's not begging God. It's not trying to convince God or argue with him, or it's just, if I use the right formula, then God's going to. Prayer is all about me being formed as I'm sharing these things. He loves it when we bring things to him. It blesses him when we depend on him and we bring our problems. Scripture talks about that we have one who can sympathize with everything we've gone through. And so really it's about taking things before God. He knows what it is, but there's a connecting with him. There's a fellowship with him. There's a deep time of his presence. And then what I walk away with isn't always even answers. It's not like I always walk away with, this is it. I got the blueprint. But I met with the man upstairs and he just made X, Y, and Z decisions for me, and now I just got to do that. That's not how it always comes. Sometimes it's releasing those things to him, letting him change my heart in that season, so that the decisions that are made, it comes from a better place. A lot of times he does give clarity in the midst of complexity. But I think when you go through all 6 of these that I'm going to share, they all add up to clarity in the midst of complexity. So you got to have all of them, So prayer is one. Number 3 here is people. Who do you have that you're seeking counsel? The Bible talks about over and over again about having godly counsel, people that you can lean into to get wisdom, perspective, seek those things out, asking people for perspective on that. I love that about my son-in-law. He's so good at this. I told him this the other day. Whenever he makes decisions, he spends a pretty good amount of time seeking out all kinds of people for advice, whether he's buying a car, whether he's making a career decision, whether he's making a financial decision. He has a lot of big decisions he's making with my daughter. And I told him the other day, I go, man, I'm so proud. I love how you make decisions. He's slow in the right kind of way because he prays through it. But like he constantly is asking, well, I'm getting this guy's perspective. I'm reaching out. Do you know anybody? And I'm like, oh, I can connect you with the guy. Next thing you know, he's calling, going, who's an expert on this or who's this? I'm like, man, I wish I was more like that. That he has this ability to seek good counsel, and that's going to,
especially being a younger guy,
exactly.
Because these days, if I am going to make a purchase or do something or make a decision, I just Google it.
Yeah.
And then I read a bunch of stuff, which I guess is okay too. Yeah. But I love the old days where you actually had to talk to somebody about it.
Exactly. But see, that goes back to the first thing I talked about, which was posture.
Yeah.
Because he's got a humble posture. He's not like, I know it all, I'm going to do this. He's humble and he's asking advice. The other one I have on here, and this is a big one too, is patience. Patience is allowing God's timing. And this is where, like, you've heard the cliche, waiting is not wasting. I get that. At times it's like, God,
playing the long game is not fun.
No, it's not. And I understand sometimes people go, Mike, there's no luxury of waiting. Decisions made, doctor called, surgery has to happen with my kid. It needs to be made by 1:00 today. What treatment are we going to do with my wife? Is she getting this treatment for cancer? I understand people say, Mike, waiting feels like a luxury at times that I don't have. Time is pressing. What I'm saying by waiting and patience is it's allowing God to be involved in the process with you. Not, because this is what I often have struggled with my life, is I will exhaust all my options first. So God is not my first option. He's my last resort. And I need to flip that around. And so that means patience to me is just walking in step. It's the idea of you're walking side by side with someone. And that patience isn't like, I'm just waiting, I got to make decisions. It's the pace that I'm walking these things out with God. I'm not getting ahead of him. I'm not getting behind him, but I'm in pace with him. The other one here too is getting the right perspective. Obviously, God's word helps us, informs our decisions. And then the last one, this might be one of the most encouraging, is whatever decision you make after you make it, lean into God's promises. Lean into his promise. God's always there for you. God is faithful. God is going to help you no matter what. So you now have the confidence to make the decision. And regardless of what's on the other side of that, I'm going to lean into his promises for the future, that whatever I'm going to need, God's going to provide it. God's going to be there for me. And that will help me be unstuck when I'm trying to make decisions. So those are just some practical ways, but that can help people even mentally move from a place of, I don't know what to do. What do I do? Well, here's some things you could be proactive about.
Yeah, that's good. And for those guys, I would think, like we just talked about, the skill and ability to confidently make decisions. And again, that's not, I make decisions. They aren't always right. My biggest, there's a lot of problems, but one of them is charting out and overanalyzing every possible outcome, especially after I made the decision. And then the other one is, after you make it, there's something called buyer's remorse.
Yeah.
And I have always struggled with that. And there's been a lot of times I've bought, especially when I was younger, I've always really valued, and I don't waste money, and I don't. But there's a lot of times I'll buy things and then I'll go take it back, and my wife would laugh and say, "Why'd you go take that back?" I'm like, I didn't feel good about it. I just got home and I thought that's overthinking. But that is and it's probably not necessarily a good thing. It perhaps maybe keeps you from spending foolishly.
Yeah.
If you want to put it in a monetary type framework, but sometimes it's a weakness.
Yeah.
And I've seen that play out in my life, and I'm like, why am I taking this back to the store? It's something stupid. But then I kind of got home and went, do I really need that, or did I buy the right one? Maybe I should have gotten something else. Should have waited. I'm bad about that, and I think that's a little bit of. It sounds good because you think, oh, you really well thought it out. No, you overthought it out. Yeah. That's what I do, and then I regret it. And I do have a lot of that too, where I do see people like my father-in-law was like this. Who was in real estate. He was a manager of pro athletes, and he was in real estate, and there was a big crash in 86, and he lost. Man, everybody did, but he lost a lot. But I never heard him talk about regrets. I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have got overextended. And here's another talk about the long game. He paid off everything, wrote checks, was broke, started a ministry. And what a fulfilling life he had for his last 25, 30 years in running a men's ministry in Arizona. Not men's ministry, anybody. It was a lot of kids, a lot of couples, counseling. But I mean, he wouldn't have been able to do that had he not lost everything in that crash in 86. So that again is an example of the long game.
And you know what, speaking of your father-in-law that we respect, because I wonder at times too, and it's not even a wonder, I know this, but going to those seasons of our life, of the things we worry about, and the theme of trusting God in the midst of that sometimes what God is really getting, what he wants best for us is not what I want.
Oh, I think that all the time. So when I pray for my things, then I always kind of wrap it up with a disclaimer, like God,
we all do that.
Like God doesn't know where my heart is. He's like, you fool. But I'll say, but if you don't want, I want to submit to your will. And so if you don't want me to have, and then I end up doing these stupid circle prayers where I'm, they always say, and the Bible says, pray for what you want and in faith and all this stuff. And I do all that. And then I always try to go, well, but I'll throw a caveat in there. But if this isn't what you want, then I pray that I will be okay with whatever your will is in this circumstance. I try to cover all my bases. So silly.
We all do that. Here's
some fine print at the end of the contract, Lord. Just to let you know that I'm vibing, I'm moving along. I get it. I'm so silly with that.
But you know what's crazy though? As silly as that sounds, only because I do the same thing, and we say it's silly. There's actually a lot of good to that. Honestly, I mean, there's Jesus who was asked the Father to take this cup away, this cup of suffering before he goes to the cross. But then he says, "Not my will, but yours be done."
Right.
And so he did do that. And as he asked, like, Lord, this is a burden, and he's like, but I know it's not the plan. I want your plan. And you see these ideas throughout Scripture where people are invited to come before God with everything. And then, yes, even making decisions. The Bible talks about make your plans, make your strategies, but in the end, say, God, whatever your will is, let that be done. And so you do see actually that principle of, God, here's what I'm thinking, here's what I'm asking, here's what I'm burdened with. But I think the thing that I wrestle with, and this is maybe you guys do too, whoever's listening, is do I want the right outcome? We talked about outcomes earlier, praying for outcomes. There's nothing wrong with saying, God, I want to pray for, an outcome of a provision, because we're told to pray for our daily bread. Ask God to provide, depend on him. Don't be so self-reliant that I've written God out of everything. And I think we have that propensity to be people who want to be so self-reliant that, God's in there somewhere when I really need him. My last resort.
That's the small print again.
It is.
Yeah, I want this Ferrari, but God, it's going to be for you somehow. You're in this.
Yeah. I think there's a thing that when we talk about outcomes, this is probably where I think this is what separates the men from the boys. When it comes to my life, who am I really living for? At the end of the day, and this is going to be that part where John looked at the John the Baptist looked at Jesus and said, "May you increase, may I decrease." And am I living my life that...
Talk about posture.
Yeah, that's exactly. It's the posture of, is my ultimate goal my comfort? Is the ultimate goal my conforming? What I mean by that is I want my life to conform to represent Jesus, to honor him, to glorify him. Or is the goal in life, my outcome is all wrapped around my comfort. That doesn't mean you don't pray for healing. That doesn't mean you don't pray, God, please take these things away. That's not what I'm saying. We should. He invites us. We're actually told to do that. We're absolutely told to do that. I was praying with someone last night whose mom has cancer, and it's pretty dire. And I was sending them a text saying, I'm praying for your mom. Here's some scripture around God's truth of healing. And so we're going to contend for those things, 100%. Contend for those outcomes. But this is where the trust part comes in. I'm going to contend, but at the end of the day, I'm going to trust that the ultimate outcome is whatever good God wants to do the way he wants to define it. So, like, for instance, we hear that all things work for the good of those who love God. And so, well, who gets to define good right there? Because if I'm defining it, it's certainly going to look way different. But I wonder, like my dad, losing my dad, was that a good thing? I would never say that's a good thing to somebody. I would never say a spouse dying of cancer, a good thing. So that we have to be careful when people slap these verses on stuff. Oh, God works all things for the good. I'm like, try telling that to the widow. Yeah. How is that good that she's alone right now and has no savings? And, I'm speaking of my mom. So that's an unfair thing. But if we redefine good as the outcome of God working in the midst of everything, my son said this the other day to me. He's 22, and he said, hey, Dad, do you think Grandpa passed away? He was telling me this, my son, because my son just turned 22. That was the age I lost my dad. So we were kind of talking through that, and he said to me, Dad, do you think Grandpa passed away because that makes you a better pastor? Because you understand people's pain and you're more sympathetic. I was like, well, for a 22-year-old to be that, And I'm like, well, see, now he's redefining a different good. He's defining a good in the terms of how it shaped me. Going through hard seasons gives me a resilient faith, not a fickle faith. And sometimes God allows us to, just like you're training an athlete and you're like, hey, we actually got to work out if we're going to build this faith muscle in you. You need some resilience. So you're not so weak in your faith. And so you see that throughout the Bible so many times where God was leading people through seasons of preparation to give them resilience so that when they did face other challenges, they had a stronger faith. Well, if that's a good thing, that I have a stronger faith and a resilient faith, not a weak faith, then going through some of the hard things, that is the good. Yeah, so again,
that's exactly what Paul was talking about.
Yeah.
When he explained in detail what he'd been through. I think he does that in Corinthians.
Yeah.
So I mentioned what he just said when he was talking about being content in all things, and then isn't it in Corinthians?
Philippians.
But isn't it in Corinthians when he goes through? I could be wrong. 1 Corinthians when he goes through each issue. I've been shipwrecked. I've been prison, and he's kind of listing them off.
He lists all the stuff that he's gone through.
Yeah,
absolutely. And you're like, but what did he get out of it? He gained Christ.
Right.
He gained Christ, and that was the greater good. And so I think that's where there's good. Good is somebody being healed. Good is that you don't have to go through that hard thing. That's good. But then there's the greater good, is that God can be refining, shaping, working. The heroes of the faith in Hebrews are people who had faith in God, and they didn't even see the outcome of their faith in their generation, but it came later. And so all of a sudden you're going, oh my gosh, that's a whole nother way of looking at things that I might actually see. God will be faithful. I may not even see it played out. It might be played out in my kid's life or my grandkid's life. So now I'm going, whoa, that's a different perspective.
So what I'm going, puzzle then.
Yeah. So now also I'm going through something that's a down deposit on a good thing later for someone else. Whoa, now it's not just about me. And so these are all the mind maturity. That's why I say it separates the men from the boys, because now you begin to have a different perspective. And this is what Job, I was just going to real quickly mention Job. And I love, as you look at the story of Job, which we talk about, man, ultimate suffering, dude loses almost everything. Didn't lose his life, although he did lose his health. His wife comes up, curse God, die. Not the most encouraging wife.
No.
But then I just wanted to read real quick the last of Job, at the very end, he says it this way. And because most people read the end of Job and they don't actually read this part.
I love this part.
And they miss it. And this is taken from, which I love, the Message kind of says it this way. Job, this is speaking of Job. So this is at the end. He realizes that God was faithful. He went through all the trials and the hardships and the doubts and the questions, friends attacking him, all of that. This is what Job says. I admit, I once lived by rumors of you. Speaking of God, I used to live by rumors of you, meaning I heard about your faithfulness secondhand. I heard how good you were and faithful from other people and the trials they went through. So he says, I admit, I once lived by rumors of you, but now I have it all firsthand from my own eyes, my own ears. He says, I'm sorry, forgive me. I'll never do that again. I'll never again live on crusts of hearsay or crumbs of rumor. And what Job would say is, worst life I've ever lived. But what he gained, the good he gained on the other side of that, was a deeply, deeply personal, intimate experience of God's faithfulness and power through his hardship. And what he's saying is, that's mine now. It's not me living off somebody else's story of God's faithfulness. I have my own story. I've seen it firsthand. I've experienced that. So now Job is saying there's this greater good of God connecting with him, experiencing him shaping me, refining me, making me more resilient. All of that becomes the ultimate good. And so I think that helps us navigate these trials and seasons that we're in and the complexities and the scenarios we're managing.
And is that kind of what Paul meant when he said, there's power in my weakness? I don't lack anything now.
Absolutely.
And that's, and so we can all sit here, and I can too. And I listen to Job saying that and go, wow, that's great. I want that. And I?
No. You know, it's funny you say that.
You know what I mean?
I was in a Bible study years ago with another young guy, and we were in our 20s, and somebody gave a message around Job and how when you go suffering and trials and hardship, that you get a deeper connection with God, you experience his power and all that, the good things you get out of that, even though, you know, and he's sitting next to me and we get done with Bible study and he goes to pray and he starts praying, God, let me go through hardship. God, let me go through trials. I moved 3 seats over. I'm like, I don't want to be near you right now. Cause if some calamity goes down in your life, I want to be. And I was like, I think that was a little naive. I don't think he was that mature in his faith that to handle, or even know what he was saying, but there was a sincerity into it that, I really want this greater good that can come on the other side of that. Just like Jesus, it says in Hebrews, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. And so even Jesus knew on the other side of the most agonizing thing anybody could ever go through, the outcome was a joy of humanity being reconciled with him. And so Jesus fixed his eyes on that. And so there's that level of super maturity to go, okay, God, you're working something in here. I'm going to focus on whatever you're going to do is for your glory. This guy didn't have that. And I'm like, I don't think you need to ask for it. I remember walking away going, dude, I don't need to ask for it. It's just going to come into your life. You don't need to go.
You're begging,
you don't need to seek it out.
You're begging for the test.
Yeah. You don't need to go. And I think in some ways, foolishly, like if you're looking for suffering, God's like, whoa, hold on a second. I've also called you this life of joy. I've also called you this life of
Do you find people that not only ask for that, but actually maybe want a story to tell, therefore ask for those things? Absolutely. And maybe it's not always from the right place?
Oh, totally. When some people can take on a martyr mentality.
Yes.
And you're like, there's legit martyrs. That's a whole other podcast. And we're called to sacrifice in everything and lay our life down for Jesus 100%. But then there's some who it's like in an unhealthy way, a dysfunctional way. You want to be the martyr, which ends up you being the victim all the time. So that's a negative way. That's a dysfunctional thing. And people oftentimes do that. But you even see some theology out there. Yes, we are called to identify with the sufferings of Christ 100%. Paul said that. Man, he identified, if Christ suffered, I'm going to suffer. Jesus said, hey, they're going to hate you because they hated me. There is a way where we do identify with the suffering of Christ. If we think going through this life, it's supposed to be, a rose bed and it's all going to be great and all of that, that's misguided. I also think that we can't overreact to that kind of theology, a suffering theology where now I'm supposed to live in this just daily torment. And now there's no place of joy and celebration and happiness that God has us, that he wants for us as well too. That's as much a part of the kingdom that we get to live today, is celebration and joy. And even in the midst of the trials, there can be joy. So I don't think we're supposed to walk around beating our backs with a whip and taking this form of like, well, I'm just supposed to suffer for Jesus today. Yes and no. But what we should be doing is rejoicing. That's the thing, is we rejoice who Jesus is, who God is, and knowing that even through the hard things that God is with us. He's never leaving us. He's not forsaking us. He doesn't disown us. He doesn't love us any less. All those things that we do when we go through those trials, we assume that my trial is God's denial, that somehow I'm going through this because he's abandoned me. No, actually, I would say he has something in store for you in the midst of that. And that's the stuff that we can have joy in, is what God's going to reveal himself in the midst of it.
So putting our expectation back in check, to go back to the way we kind of started this. Well, and even all the way back to where we started, was joking around at being envious of the life of my dog because he has no expectations for the day. And so, you know what I mean? And I look at him and go, man, you expect your bowl to be full.
Yeah.
That's about it.
That's about it.
You know, and again, and this is pointed at me too, man. I suffer because I'm holding on to the expectations of the way things should be in my mind. So what that is it's a battle about expectations, but it's also a battle about perspective. And wow. You know what I mean? And so I think the reminder there, and I don't really, we're citing this and you're giving some great steps to fixing that. I guess it's just a work in progress, like we all are. But in terms of taking the reins and realizing the problem is us, there is always going to be that voice inside of us, I think, and I have that too, that is pounding away saying, I need it to be the way I want it and need it to be in order to feel okay. That's what's got to be fixed. That's the perspective that has to shift in terms of accepting and having realistic expectation. I don't want to say realistic expectation. I don't think it's the right word. But in order to put those expectations into a context that and realizing and getting a spiritual maturity to where I mentioned the long game a minute ago, where you realize it doesn't really matter what I think they should be. I need to submit to the will of God and realize and look at, and that's why the word is so important. I used to hear people say, get in the word. And I go, yeah, okay. I didn't really understand what that meant. Well, what the reason why it's important is you get the perspective that can only be gained through some of these stories of these guys like Paul and like Job at the end, where their expectations were healthy at that point, but it took some pain.
Yeah.
A lot of pain in some cases, in both of their cases.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And you look at the Paul and the rest of the apostles, every single one of them, their life did end as a martyr.
Oh, and horribly.
And that's the other side of this too. There's a mechanism that I don't agree with, but I did it. I've done it. And so I got to confess it too. But the comparison mechanism, which is when you're going through hardship, just find somebody that's life is way worse.
Oh yeah.
Well, at least it's not that.
My wife played that on me the other day when I was complaining. She's right. She was right. But
and we do that. And there's like, I used to do that with our kids. They're like, well, hey, at least you're not the starving kid in Africa.
Right. Right.
When, they're complaining that we're not having the right food when they were kids. And, and it's like a total mind game, to, get to eat your vegetables. But the other side of it too is, I think the negative. So there's a place for that. That's that perspective thing we're talking about. Like all of a sudden you go, oh gosh, I'm kind of, man, I'm really grateful now. All of a sudden, what I was complaining about, now I'm kind of grateful because, gosh, you're right. I'm not going through what they're going through. Oh, that would be horrible. There's definitely a place for that perspective. So that's the healthy side of it. The unhealthy side of that, that game that we play about comparison is it could actually rob you of, it's a way of denial, because you can always find somebody worse. But then if you do that, you actually tell yourself what you're going through isn't real, because you can find somebody else that's worse, and you go, but no, it's relative. Like, my trial is my trial. It might not be theirs, and thank God mine's not theirs. But just because theirs might be worse doesn't mean it's not a trial to me. Doesn't mean it's not a worry to me. Doesn't mean so that mind game of comparison can work 100% in a good way, and then I could also flip it and use it in a negative way. And I've done both that so many times. I had a friend the other day where I was a mutual friend that we have, and I was talking about some things I'm struggling with, and I kept spinning it. Because I was doing that, at least this and at least that, and at least I'm not this. And he looked at me and he goes, I think you're kind of denying some real stuff you're going through. I was like, gosh, I was. I'm like, no, because it's in me being honest and authentic and vulnerable about, no, this is my trial. Yes, I know it's not yours. But don't rob me of this trial, because if I just kind of deny it, what ends up happening is, I stuff it somewhere. And I'm just trying to like kind of psych my way and try to hype my way through it, versus like the honesty, because what it's robbing me from in that comparison game, it's robbing me from taking that to the Lord and actually saying, God, I actually am struggling with this. God, I am really stressed out about this. And then what I've done is I've short-circuited that process of the good thing he wants to show about his nature and character and love to me. So that's we have to be honest about it. That's why give ourselves permission to be honest about the things that we struggle with.
And that's kind of a, as we come to a close, that's kind of a learned practice. And we talk at times about our Wednesday night men's group, and we have guys show up, and sometimes they'll show up and they sit quiet for 3 or 4 weeks, and then sometimes the dam breaks. Sometimes they need to be shown that vulnerability in others, and I've noticed that with certain guys where, and it's not like it's a cry session, I'm not saying that, but there's a lot of times when we'll bring up topics, and sometimes we start and we say, okay, like right now we're going through Luke, and some weeks we don't even get to it. One guy will just take off on something, and then a lot of guys say, I identify with that, I'm going to give you this, and then I'm going to have my own issues, my own struggles. So I do think it's a practice. And it takes that, and hopefully, if this podcast does anything for the people that listen, I want that to be when Mike and I are pretty, Pastor Mike and I are pretty vulnerable with talking about, I never wanted this to be because I believe me, I am a, do as I say, not as I do, because there's a lot of these things I don't have figured out by any means. And I hope we always come away and you get that feeling after we're done. But also, I also wanted to say, well, number one, we always appreciate hearing from people who are enjoying the podcast. And then you have somebody like Ben Lundquist, who's got such a great podcast, and he thought enough of us and of listened to a couple of episodes and posted one on his. I love the way it grows through that kind of that way, and love hearing that. And also, we asked for this a long time ago, but if there are topics that you want to hear kicked around, not that we have any answer, but oftentimes it is great. And for some of you, I know that we talk about these groups and meeting with guys and breakfasts, and a lot of you don't have that. You may live somewhere where you're isolated. You may just not have time. And your drive an hour and back from work or whatever, that's the time you fellowship. And if this can serve as that fellowship, even though it is a podcast or taped or whatever, then so be it. But take that step. But if there is a topic that you want to hear kicked around and discussed, how can they get a hold of us?
Yeah, the best way you guys can reach out is just go to our website, verticalpursuit.org. There's a link on there that you can connect and reach out and contact us, and just submit your questions, and it'll get sent right to us.
And we've talked about doing an episode sometime where we just literally, and for you a lot through, you're a lot more experienced spiritually, and not spiritually, but read, and you've done this a long time, and you've gotten every question asked of you before. Oftentimes this podcast is me teeing up, asking you questions because I want the answer, and I know others do too. So I want to do an episode soon where we just take a bunch of questions and kick them around. Yeah. But any big topics, we try to hit a lot of them, but most of the time, the way we pick these are things we hear others saying to us or things that are honestly weighing on us personally.
Absolutely.
So anyway, we hope you encourage others too. We know word of mouth is a big way to do this. We don't promote this. We don't spend money to advertise it, certainly. It just kind of happens by word of mouth, and we love the growth curve that it is on right now, and we love what it does for you, hopefully something, and we love the time that you always spend with us on Vertical Pursuit. So we will see you on our next episode, and a great guest coming up, so stay tuned. We invite you to subscribe to our podcast, comment, or message us, and check out our website at verticalpursuit.org. Download the VP app and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.